Happening now, we want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room episode number 189 on September 2nd, 2020. My name is Jason Neiffer, and I am the Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, the state virtual school located on the fabulous University of Montana campus in beautiful Missoula, Montana. And joining me tonight, as always, good evening, Dr. Wesley Fryer. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm well. It is an interesting year, but I am thankful for many things, and that includes being thankful to be here. So I am still ostensibly the technology integration and innovation specialist at the Cassidy School, but I am teaching 6 sections of classes this year. So a couple Spanish introductory 5th grade classes and a couple media literacy and digital literacy 5th and 6th grade classes. So in some classes, we're just kind of staying one day ahead of the kids. But if you've been teaching any length of time at all, you probably know what that is like. So, but it's going well. What are we going to do tonight, Jason? I have lost my link. So I had carefully formed my URL to tweet out to our audience of 5 that we're live. But I heard a rumor we're going to talk about some tech news, and I think we're going to talk about some Apple stuff, perhaps, that got moved from last week. I moved a couple links up there. So
yep, that's true. So for those of you joining us for the first time, first, welcome. But the EdTech Situation Room podcast is a once-a-week podcast where we go through the week's technology news and try to shoot it through the prism of education. Because as it turns out, technology, pretty critical platform to delivering K through higher ed education across the world. You can get these links at edtechsr/links. As Dr. Fryer referred to, we almost never get through all of them. And the ones that we can't carry over or have lost their timeliness are still interesting articles at the time they're posted. So feel free to go there to check out what's on our minds. And tonight we have several topics. I would like to start off with a COVID-19 article, which is probably not a real shock. We have Apple news, Android news, Firefox news, Microsoft news, Chrome OS news, and some articles on security and our favorite topic, which of course is miscellaneous. And then we'll end the episode tonight with Geeks of the Week. So let me start off with, I received an interesting email today. There is an organization in Oregon called OETC, which used to be the Oregon Educational Technology Consortium. It now stands for something else, like the Organization for Educational Technology, something. But OETC is a buying consortium in the Pacific Northwest, and Montana, Idaho, the other major Pacific Northwest states
Utah?
are Washington and Oregon, and they are...
It's going to be a great show tonight, folks.
Yeah, we're really on top of it. Although I'm going to go ahead and guess if our audience is anything like we are, you're probably at this point anyways. But they released an interesting survey today of, this was mostly aimed at administrators, IT staff, CIOs, and teachers across the Northwest. And their headline is that the survey revealed vast differences in timelines and attitudes, apprehension, and the biggest concerns they face. Although I would say in reading the results myself, I found them to be maybe a little more consistent that, it's unlikely we're going to have anywhere near a normal school year for the next year. But I thought I would start off with and maybe get our predictions in part, based on what's maybe coming in the near future. But it was mostly Oregon and Washington teachers, CIOs, tech directors, et cetera, that answered the survey. Most were K-12. And it was predominantly almost half of them were from larger schools as opposed to medium and small size schools. But a couple of things that are pretty interesting, that the question they asked is that if you had to guess, when do you think your school will have students on premises, whether it's in the hybrid model or full opening? Of course, many schools did go back in some way, shape, or form, but the guesses here were fall 2020. So in other words, either now or in the near future, winter 2020, and that was 38% of respondents. 41% of respondents said that winter 2020 would be it. 9% said spring 2021, and then 12% said not during the 2020 to 21 school year, or not until the next school year. So, Wes, obviously you are in a school that did return back, but do you have any thoughts on, 6 months, 12 months from now, will we see a predominant number of schools be able to go back physically, or any thoughts about that?
I think it's going to be all over the map as it is today. Gosh, we have 30% of the schools that in Oklahoma, the public schools that are back, are not having a mask mandate for students. I don't know how sustainable that is, but we're just all over the place. Thankfully, our school has been, I think we've done everything we possibly could in terms of equipment and procedures, mask mandates, and everything. So, we have such gaps today in terms of funding and resources for schools. We've had just absolute heroic work done by so many in education to bring students devices, to bring families and students food. I mean, to do all kinds of things. But we just don't have a uniform or level playing field, or whatever kind of metaphor you want to use, in terms of education. And so I think this is just going to continue to amplify that, and we're going to have all kinds of situations. The good news is, and this is something that we did not know, because no one does know how this is all going to play out and happen. I mean, we haven't had a huge spike in cases, even though our numbers have been higher, in our state, where, like, we've heard about some colleges where they go back and then immediately they've got, hundreds of kids testing positive. Now, I will say we're not like some universities are doing, testing universally everybody. I've heard about some, universities who've done that for all faculty. They've done that for students. It's all over the place. So I think it's extremely hard to generalize in terms of what everyone's experiences are going to be. I think there still is an expectation that as the normal flu season ramps up, things are going to get tougher. And so there's a high likelihood that later this fall, schools like ours that have gone back face-to-face are going to need to, go remote. But I don't think we can just generalize. I think we're going to need to have lots and lots of support in a lot of different ways for teachers. And it's going to be the long haul. To touch on some, disinformation, vaccine related articles we've discussed before, I think that countries and groups are going to be pushing vaccines really rapidly forward. That along with disinformation and malinformation campaigns is going to cause a lot of folks who might not have already been in an anti-vaxxer group to really question that. And so I think we're going to have a lot of difficulty in, quickly having a vaccine that is effective, applied throughout the country to really, speed this process. I think it's going to be a very long road. We're in a marathon.
And then one other question I want to ask based on this survey, Wes, and this is actually leading to a discussion that I was hoping to have with you tonight. When do you think you'll return to normal operations, all students and staff present on all days, no restrictions? And I guess, my assumption would be that there's no way that all schools go back to normal in the 2021 school year. But do you have any thoughts, about that as relation to schools in your area, your school in particular?
What is normal, I guess? We have 4 different modes that students can be in right now, from regular face-to-face to either a short-term or a long-term flex learning situation. And then we've, I don't know. I think we're all going to be wearing masks. I think we're all going to have to be accommodating different students. We're not having students just, tune in live across the board to classes. There's a few teachers, I think, that are experiencing that, but I think, it seems so crazy that nobody can say with certainty, what is going to be happening tomorrow, or what's going to be happening in a few weeks. So I think, like we've said before, it seems like until there is a vaccine that is very effective and has been administered broadly, we're not going to have folks going back to a quote normal, but what is a normal? I don't think it is
Right.
going to stabilize in the short term. I will say that in the case of like Oklahoma City schools, so we've got I think somewhere upwards of 50,000 students, and just the large that Oklahoma City Public and Tulsa are our largest two districts in our state. We have over 500 districts, most of whom have less than 200 students. So we're very rural. But in terms of those large districts, I mean, Oklahoma City has pulled off one-to-one, getting a device for every student. They opened up remote this last week. One thing that I'll mention, I'm not blogging about this, but we've got some friends who have gone with the remote option for, I'll just say one of our suburban districts that has been, I won't mention the name of the company, but it's an off-the-shelf, basically computer-aided instruction. Here it is in a can. Watch these videos, do this work. And we know some people that are extremely frustrated and not happy with that kind of situation. And so, even with the best laid plans, I think schools are going to have to be agile and take a look at what they're doing. And I think that the school districts that are providing teachers who are specifically, catering to and teaching to those at-home students are going to have the most success. The teachers and the school districts who are trying to have teachers sort of do it all in terms of face-to-face instruction and with students who are, at home, it's just really, really challenging. So hard to generalize, definitely a good thing to touch base and kind of see what is happening, because it's a very dynamic thing. But I will say I've been very pleased, of course, that we've been able to stay. I think this is our third full week of back-to-back face-to-face with students. They came back on the 14th of August. We had a 2-week window where students who were thinking maybe they were going to want to stay home and what we're calling flex learning could come home and try, or they could try the flex and then they can switch. And then we asked them to commit. And so I know in my case, out of all of my students, I only had a small handful that were doing that. And in one case, they've decided to go ahead and come back here. So it's just going to be pretty interesting. And we certainly are asking not only a lot of teachers, we're asking a lot of parents to do a lot and to, make this thing work. And it is not something that I see at this point as being stabilized. I really think we're moving into it now. Other schools are going back, quote unquote, as far as, with their remote, and we're seeing how this can work. We're fortunate to have wonderful resources at our school. I think I mentioned this before on the show, with a HEPA 13 filter in every classroom, with class sizes. My biggest class is 12. We have not had to do the situation where kids only get to come to school a couple days a week and then they have to rotate. And a lot of schools are in that boat. My sister's children up in the Kansas City, Liberty area are in that kind of a boat. And, Edmond, where we go to church north of us, is in that situation. So yeah, just a whole lot of variety. Do you see some generalizations, and what have you heard from your Montana folks in terms of the situation? And I'm guessing maybe you're a little similar as far as mask mandate and the way that political situation, which shouldn't be political, but it is, has played out for schools.
Yeah, the governor has ordered masks in K-12 schools, and so we have that, but that does not mean that it's not political. And there have been some relatively serious, contentious fights here in regards to this. Unfortunately, I don't need to be part of those discussions because of my role in a distance learning program. But it's definitely happening here. I do not know any school that is starting remote only in the state of Montana. In fact, I'm pretty sure no school. I would say that there's probably 3 categories of schools. There's ones that started regular face-to-face, but with social distancing and other requirements like masks in place. Then there are some districts that are and by which I should start off, that first category is no change in schedule, regular school otherwise, right? Other than the social distancing and that in place. And there are plenty of small towns in Montana that haven't seen a single case of COVID and are unlikely to see a case of COVID unless it dramatically expands. Although I will note that COVID cases in Montana are trending up. The second category is schools that are doing some kind of alternative scheduling, and then allowing students to also kind of zoom into a classroom, right? And then the third category is folks that are doing alternative scheduling, but also have stood up their own online program that is more in the style of my program, right? Asynchronous distance learning, with some live video interactive pieces to the courses. And some of the larger districts and a handful of medium-sized school districts have done that as well. And the part that especially in the last 7 days or so, that I can't get around is I think it was a tweet, it may have been an article about how, I can't wait for this to get back to normal. And what Wes, I think you asked a good question, like what normal means, but I'm not sure if we fully understand yet that it is fairly likely that COVID, in regards to public education, all education models really, I want to start K through, actually preschool through higher ed, right? This is going to have such a ripple effect in education that we're not going to see the end of this for some time. I'm fairly certain that our careers, Wes and I's careers, will see some impact from COVID until we're done in education. I would add secondarily that there's going to be such incredible challenges to try. It's not like we can, let's say we come up with a vaccine on February 1st, 2021, and we're able to get a serious number of people vaccinated, and that a lot of people take advantage of the vaccine. All those questions are huge question marks, but for the sake of discussion, let's say all those are true. I do not think that fall 2021 will be able to start as a normal school year for a couple of reasons. First, the incredible differences in student circumstances that COVID is exposing. There was a lot of indication of that this past spring, but we're not going to really see the rubber hit the road on that situation until we have a relatively normal school year that we can evaluate which students made no progress during that time, which students lost progress during that time. Lots of states limit how old you can be and still access public schooling services. In Montana, 19-year-olds, we don't pay for 19-year-olds, pay schools to serve 19-year-olds. We don't have a very aggressively funded adult education system in the state of Montana, which means that there could be students, not just students next year and the year after, but students that are currently fifth graders or seventh graders or ninth graders that are going to get behind. And because of the somewhat rigorous structures we've had in place for literally decades going on centuries, that we may not be able to deal with those extraordinary differences in a way that can get kids back on pace to getting where they're going, right? No matter where that going is. And I worry that we're not going to see this for a long time. And so my guess is that unless you are in your very first year of teaching, every teacher, every administrator, every IT director is going to see impacts of this for the rest of your career, because it is going to lead to some extraordinary circumstances just to clean up the mess after the mess is no longer an active hot mess, right? So I don't know what that means. I know that I was a little annoyed early on when this was just a crisis situation in the spring, that reformers, right, so-called reformers, either self-described or people that are actually in education reform, said this is an opportunity. And I also have said too that we should never waste a good crisis, right? We should also be looking for ways to rebuild things better after this is all over with. But I do think that we have a lot of structures that are just not going to be flexible enough to deal with students' actual needs once this is said and done, and it's no longer an active health threat. So, any thought about that, Dr. Fryer?
Well, let me assure folks, we're gonna get to some other articles too. But
yeah,
one related thought is, I consider myself someone who's had a fair bit of experience, teaching at a distance, supporting teachers, teaching at a distance. today, and I am teaching fifth grade Spanish for the first time, but actually this wasn't a Spanish class. This was one of my media literacy and digital literacy classes. I had assigned students. Basically, one of the assignments that I'd given in the spring for fifth grade, and what I was able to realize just working with my kids and having them work through this is it was a terrible assignment. Like, my expectations were really, really off base. Now, I also had a wonderful lesson today with my sixth grade, probably one of the better ones that I've done, with lots of ahas and lots of great conversation. But one of the things that drives home to me is that no matter how much experience we have, we all need to be willing to, recalibrate and just, try to figure stuff out, kind of erase and not start over, but, be willing to reboot some lessons. And we just need to be in this for the long haul, communicating with each other, sharing about what's working, sharing about what's not working, and just also what is developmentally appropriate, not only for the kids that we have and the ages that they are, but also where they are with their literacy and their abilities with their technology. It is just, we are in the deep end of the pool together, and we're having to swim, and we're going to have to be in here for a long time. So basically, we've all been chucked off of the ship, and we're swimming around. And thankfully, I don't think there's a lot of sharks around, but like literally it is like a survival situation where it's very taxing. And I will also say that the level of anxiety and the amount of work that teachers are doing is extraordinary. It was in the spring when we were doing emergency remote learning. And I think this is one of the most important roles administrators should always play, but certainly need to be playing today, is to try and have the pulse of where their teachers are in terms of wellness. And we need to be finding ways to really lighten the load, and to also, you've said it before, Jason, when you remind us, this is a global pandemic. This is a big deal. And so sometimes things that we might be getting bent out of shape on, and sometimes we inflict these things on ourselves because we're perfectionists. We really need to be reminding each other about wellness and about boundaries. I've had multiple conversations with colleagues about that. And I think that, some of that might come down from admin, but even when it doesn't, it's really important for us to encourage each other about wellness and for us to have those kinds of boundaries. And to recognize that we're in this for a marathon. So it's just amazing to me how much, we're of course a diverse world and we're a diverse nation. But it is, we tend to think of public school and we think about something that is, consistent. Yeah, I know what you're saying with that. And today there are just so many different situations that students are in. And it's incredibly challenging for teachers because we just have never asked teachers as an entire group to pivot and flex and to change in this kind of way, especially with respect to remote and distance learning and, learning that involves, frankly, it needs to involve a lot of design and a lot of different kinds of instructional approaches than what we would just typically do face to face. So, right. Jason, I think you probably, are in a good career field. I'm thinking, you got a lot of expertise that's going to be needed for a long time. I think that's what we're saying here.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I would also note too is that it is incredibly difficult to teach online if you approach it like you're going to be able to recreate face-to-face. I think you can create effective environments, but it's just really hard, I think, to try to recreate whatever magic you were spinning in the face-to-face classroom. So thank you for indulging me in that conversation. I've been kind of talking about that in the peripherals with my colleagues here in Montana, and it's nice to get a little external perspective. So, okay, let's jump into some tech news. Is there a place you would like to start tonight, sir?
Sure. Let's go to some Apple articles. I've got a couple new ones and then a couple their carryovers from last week. The first one from last week is actually an August 16th article. You may have put this one in, how Fortnite baited Apple into a losing battle. And this is from, it's Medium, and it's from a source called 10. And it says Epic Games ambush shows how antitrust scrutiny has changed in the App Store landscape. And basically, I mean, this is an important current event for people to know what has happened and what is happening. And then I'll share my perspectives on it, Jason, and then let's hear your understanding. Apple generally, with most app developers, requires a 30% cut. That's the deal of the App Store. There are certain groups. I think that Amazon is one. I think that perhaps Netflix is another, that they have some special deals, but by and large, that's what you have to pay. And so what I understand is that Epic Games, who makes Fortnite, which is incredibly popular, decided that they wanted to fight that. And so they knew this would be in violation of Apple's rules, but they went ahead and had some ways that folks could be paying for some things, I guess, in-app that were not going to go through Apple's in-app purchase and their ability to take 30% off. So Apple ended up cutting off their continued provision of the app, their updates to the app. What I understand was the judge had tried to get them to stop, and then I had heard this, not read that in the article, that the judge had not wanted Apple to take the steps that it did. But anyway, we have a legal battle on our hands now, and a lot of folks who are Fortnite fans, and we're playing on iOS, and I think this is also Mac OS, right? Are not pleased about it, and so what it points to are some issues with alleged monopolies, and does Apple have the right to do this? And they've built this platform, but they wield such power, and so Epic is picking this fight, and I would not think that they would win, but goodness gracious, who knows what's going to happen in today's political environment? So, how do you read this, Dr. Neiffer, in terms of the issues and what's going on, and even what's happened since that article? That article is now about 2 weeks old.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think since then, Apple has deleted Epic Games' developer account, which is an unbelievably aggressive step here. But I mean, I know it's hard to know who to cheer for here, and I'll admit it's a little confusing for me too, from the standpoint that I do think that Apple sets up an elegant experience for users to where they have a hardware platform and an app delivery platform that meets a certain kind of user that is desirable to developers, right? And so it's worth something. I don't know if it's 30% or not, but it's worth something. And at the same time, Fortnite or the Epic Games' platform is saying that that's too much, and that we don't need you, basically, right? And there's all sorts of little pieces of evidence that both sides could end up winning here. I think the fact that Apple just went ahead and deleted it that's a very aggressive stance, but that's one to suggest that they feel like that they're going to win this, that there's no real implication for them to do that. At the same time, in the last 2 weeks, iOS devices that have Fortnite installed on them have gone for hundreds of dollars above their retail price. And in one case, an iPad mini went for $5,000 on eBay last week. And I've played Fortnite just once. I like the game. I try to stay away from addictive substances, so I did not get totally into that, right? Otherwise, I probably would be playing it right now instead of engaging in adult conversation with a valued colleague and friend. But the point being that there's something to that game, obviously, and so I think Epic also has a pretty good point too, that they're going to have to find a way to do this a little differently. I know that Amazon has had real battles with the good folks at Apple on this. Their Kindle device, you can't buy anything on the Kindle device. It's just a reader for them where you log in and download books. But also because Apple is not totally off base, you can have like the Target app, Walmart app, Amazon app. Don't charge those fees because they know they're not going to get 30% of everything you buy on the Home Depot app on iOS. So I don't know really who to cheer for here. They both have, I think, important points that are worthwhile. But I guess I would also spin it in another direction to say that I do think that apps would probably well, frankly, go down in price a little bit, and there would be more flexible options for schools for purchasing app with managed iOS devices, if they were able to hold back a little bit on taking such a high percentage of developer fees. And one thing you may not know is that almost every platform, if you've never sold anything on a platform before, every platform takes a cut, right? There's no such thing as a free platform unless you're rolling your own. And that doesn't exist anywhere on the Apple universe. It does a little bit on the Android universe, but not really. There's still just primarily the Play Store and a couple alternatives. So yeah, super interesting article. And, Apple is the Tiffany of devices, right? They have a clientele that they serve. They are very well desired in almost every market because they tend to cater to a certain clientele. And maybe they win this, maybe they don't.
So in addition to on the Apple front, this was another interesting fight, but this is one where Apple actually backed down, and I definitely think this was the right decision for them because they were on the wrong side of the argument. This is and I guess I need to keep, I've been in the habit, by the way, of putting our articles as we talk about them into our chat. That's actually made it nice because you can scroll through and actually can go to the end like of YouTube, and all of the links that we've been doing that we actually talked about are in there. So I'll drop this one in. But this is a Verge article from August 23rd. Apple apologizes to WordPress, won't force the free app to add purchases after all. And I had actually seen Jason tweet an earlier version of this when it appeared to be a standoff. So if you're not familiar, WordPress is one of the world's most popular content engines for websites. I don't know what the exact percentage is, but a sizable number of the world's websites are powered by WordPress. WordPress they had and have an app, but kind of similar to this, Apple was upset thinking that they were circumventing their processes in letting people make a purchase that didn't give Apple a cut. And so it looked like they were going to get pulled, and I think maybe they even did for a little bit. But what they ended up doing, WordPress had done everything I think they could do. They had removed those features because what people were able to do anyway, it's not something that could be done in the app. And so Apple apologized, which is kind of rare in these kind of situations. And, they've made up, and WordPress is back on the store. So, it's just important issues in terms of, and this ties to the tech correction, which we talked about before. How are we as a society? Will we as a United States society regulate the tech platforms? Will we, are we going to, there are regulations and laws that obviously affect the ways the platforms operate and the ways that liability operates and things like that. But these are both related issues because they have to do with Apple being upset at whether or not people can purchase things, inside these apps. And in one case, they've really gone to the wall and they're there to fight and litigate. And somebody's now just, had their account disabled and deleted, I guess, or whatever, disabled off of Apple's developer site. And then on the other side, we've got another group making up. So how does this tie to education, Jason? Bring us back to the EdTech situation room with all this.
Well, if you take advantage of the free app universe, right, which is pretty prolific, lots of free apps out there of varying quality, but many of them are very good. You do not want Apple bullying free app providers into finding some way to profit off of them. Now, it seems clear that's not what they were doing here. That it was truly a mistake, but you do not want that to happen. And if it gets to a point where every app is suddenly a for purchase app, it dramatically decreases the usefulness of mobile devices in K-12 education. Period.
Absolutely. One more quick Apple, and we'll wrap up, I think, that series that we've got. This one was from yesterday in Ars Technica. iOS 13.7 launched today with a new system for battling the pandemic. And we've talked about contact tracing and the ways in which certain countries, not the United States, are being quite assertive or aggressive in terms of their utilization of apps that are assisting, public employees, law enforcement, health officials whoever it is that are involved in doing contact tracing and trying to protect society. So Apple had previously in April, both Apple and Google had announced a joint plan where they were developing this system that was going to use Bluetooth to allow in contact tracing. And so this is the second phase of this rollout. They rolled some stuff out in May, which was an API that let app developers take advantage of that and have some custom apps. And I know that there's some schools doing that. I've read some stories about colleges that have resident advisors, RAs, who are using their apps and reporting on students and on behavior and things like that. And as that relates to COVID, those features are more robust because you can actually have detection of what devices you've been in contact with, and that's going to assist officials and people, in being able to do contact tracing. So what this allows is not just in special apps, but I guess this allows for I think that states have to buy into it. So it says so far Maryland, Nevada, Virginia, the District of Columbia are participating, but it's called an Exposure Notifications Express system. And there are more states that are taking a look at this. 20 countries have launched exposure tracking apps. And so it doesn't impact existing solutions, Apple and Google say. So I'll note that it's great to see Apple and Google collaborating in this way. As we've talked about on the show before, there's privacy implications to this, but I think the public health importance of this is huge. And of course, we want all of our data to be secure and these kind of things not to be hacked, but I would see this as a positive. It's interesting that in the United States, we're taking that on a state-by-state basis, but that is kind of the way we roll in our, in some cases with some things in our, Federalist 10th Amendment powers not specifically given to the nation are reserved for the states, I guess. So are you guys talking about that in Montana, Jason, in terms of any kind of statewide contact tracing, or do you see this affecting you guys?
I have not seen any discussion related to technological means of doing that and adopting a statewide system. And Montana is kind of the state of local control. It's a popular term here. And so as an example of this, where there is a extensive debate in the state of Montana right now about allowing spectators at sporting events. Most sporting events are happening. There have been no seasons canceled, at least at the high school ranks in the state of Montana. Now the debate is whether there should be spectators to these sports, and then secondarily, how closely together they can sit, should there be. So, and that's been left to local county health officials because there's such a disparity between large and small counties, the percentage of COVID cases, and so nothing here yet. But certainly interesting, and tech surveillance can be used for good, right? Obviously, you want massive privacy protections put into place, although I do think based on both earlier articles and more recent ones as they're starting to roll out the tech, Apple and Google's approach to this are both pretty privacy minded, right? Because I don't think you need to straight up violate people's privacy to be able to do the kind of contact and tracing that you're talking about.
Sounds good. All right. Well, probably enough Apple news for your Google blood, sir. Would you like to dive into some Google stuff, or you want to go somewhere else next?
Yeah, let's do a couple Google things here. A couple of articles I held over from last week because they're super interesting. The first one was from The Verge on August 18th. Samsung is doing something that might actually bring me back to a Samsung phone. And I have to say, I have not been a Samsung customer since my first Android phone, which was the Galaxy Note 2. I have owned a Galaxy Note 4, a used one that I picked up for mostly just for project purposes because I was looking to make a kind of a project machine out of it a year or two back. But otherwise, I have been utilizing, as of late, mostly Motorola and Google phones is my Android preference. But one of the frustrating things I have about Samsung phones is that the updates on them are terrible. And where iOS absolutely dominates Android is in the fact that that even older devices receive new versions of iOS on the day it is released, where that is not true at all in the Android universe. And you're guaranteed, well, you're supposed to be guaranteed 2, which is one of the conditions Google makes in using the software, but sometimes it doesn't happen at all. And if it does, it's just 1 update. And I find that to be incredibly frustrating because Google's Android operating system does evolve pretty fast, and the new versions have great new features, right? Same is true on the iOS side. Well, Samsung is now working to guarantee that you will get 3 major Android updates. And even though they've been a little quicker on the rollout of Android updates in the past couple of years, they're still slower than some of the other Android manufacturers. But that's a very tempting thing to me here, that there is especially in their premium and mid-range devices, they will give you 3 Android updates. And so I'm pretty satisfied with my phone structure right now. Frankly, I don't really need a cell phone to do my job during the day. I'm going to be stuck at home here for, long time, right?
Wow.
So I'm not going anywhere. So I don't really need a good mobile phone. In fact, I could probably get away, other than phone calls and texts from family, I could probably get away with just having a tablet around the house. And I have a couple choices, as Wes is probably not surprised to find out, to be able to utilize a tablet in my house. But that's a really great piece of news that they're going to head in that direction. And then one other piece of interesting news that I guess I would like to hear another geek's attitude about. I have been obsessed for a very long time with e-ink devices, right? And part of it is I do like reading on my Kindle. It's not my favorite research platform if I'm just paging through something, or I've also figured out that I hate travel books on Kindle. It doesn't allow me to move around deftly enough to feel like I'm getting or using the books the way I want to. But for long form fiction and nonfiction, if I'm reading a book cover to cover, it's pretty hard to beat the Kindle. And a long time ago, when the Nook was first released, this was 7, 8, 9 years ago, you could hack the Nook because it was Android, right? And it didn't look like Android because they built something on top of it. You could hack the Nook. Very strange phrase I just uttered. You could hack the Nook to put Android on it and use it as an Android tablet. And I bought a used Nook. I hacked Android on it, and as it turns out, I loved it. It was super great because when I was reading the New York Times, when I was reading newspaper articles, when I was reading long web pages, I love to be able to use that non-backlit e-ink screen. Well, as it turns out, there are 2 kinds of devices that are starting to become a little more prolific. One of them is the E-Ink Android tablet. They've been around since Android started, but there are new form factors. The one that I'm currently extremely interested in is a 12-inch E-Ink tablet, so iPad Pro-sized E-Ink tablet that runs Android 9. And you can actually buy an E-Ink external monitor that plugs in via USB or USB-C. And I have to say, obviously you're not going to watch YouTube on this. And I've looked at e-ink phones. I've been very tempted by it. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm just a nerd. But I think this is interesting. And so I happen to find someone that understands my soul. His name is Alex Kranz at Gizmodo, and he's talking about one of these Eink tablets and says that he is absolutely in love with the Eink Books Nova 2. So, Wes, I got to ask, you're a gadget guy. I've seen you with an awful lot of interesting tech in your hands. Eink tablet.
Yes, but the reason I am drawn to them, and I think Bob Sprankle, rest his soul, might have been the one to mention this and talk to me about it. It has to do with multitasking. Now,
yes,
I do find myself almost unable to read these days nonfiction and stuff it's just fiction is different, but nonfiction. Sometimes without having a quote and sharing something. That's part of the way that I process things. But when you're reading on an iPad or a phone or any, let's just say smartphone or tablet, which is multifunction, it's challenging. And I think having just that single use device can really help you perhaps, not be tempted by your Twitter or your other social media, and obviously we all have the ability to be disciplined and to not, switch the apps and things like that. But I came really, I would have loved this summer actually to pick up a Kindle Paperwhite. The fact that they're waterproof, the battery lasts so long. We do have a Kindle that our youngest daughter, is kind of appropriated, and she's used it, and I've switched around and used it some, but I haven't used a backlit one yet. So I mean, that technology is really appealing for the battery life and the fact that you can be so focused. And back in the day, what were those called? We had Alpha Smart keyboards in my fourth grade classroom. This is harkening back to like 90, 95, 96. These were like, they had 4 lines, but I think that was probably similar kinds of e-ink technology because it wasn't any kind of LCD stuff. But it was, super long battery life running on a few, AA or AAA batteries or something like that. I think there's a huge need that we have for being able to, have devices that have super long battery life and do individual things really, really well. But is the Nook even around anymore? I think that's going to be our show title, by the way. Hack the Nook. So
hack the Nook,
folks. Yeah.
Hashtag hash the Nook. I do believe that it is. And there is a very extensive kind of B tier architecture around related to e-ink devices, right? But I have to say, there's a Hisense. I think it's Hisense, maybe it's Huawei, but there's a Chinese e-ink phone that runs. The key piece here is making sure it's got the Play Store on it. There's a lot of Android devices, Android e-ink phone devices that you can buy, but they don't have a Google Play Store on them, which means they're functionally worthless, right? You can't get the apps that you really need. But I would absolutely be in the market for an under $500 e-ink phone, and the battery life on them is amazing. 6-7 days of battery life on there because the screen sucks up a ton of color screen, high resolution color screen sucks up a ton of battery. Yes, I couldn't watch YouTube on it. Yes, I couldn't watch Netflix on it. But the bottom line, Wes, was your original point that I don't necessarily want to multitask, and maybe I want a better device when I want to watch YouTube or when I want to watch Netflix. And if I could get my email and text messaging plus reading apps and be able to check the news, that's a pretty compelling device for me, assuming the phone part works.
Well, I'll say this about tablets. So it's interesting. We hopefully next week, I don't know if they've arrived yet, but we have a lot of iPads that are arriving at school, and our 6th graders are going to be using an iPad as their device for this first semester, and then they're going to switch with 7th grade for Chromebook. 5th graders I'm teaching right now all have Chromebooks. Last night I commented to my wife because, I don't want to read in bed with my laptop. I just don't. A tablet is an absolutely fantastic form factor. And I honestly do like being able to do things besides simply read, being able to sometimes watch media, but, capture screenshots and share things on social media, being able to access social media. So I think that, tablets are not going to go away. And I don't think that we're going to see this complete, merger of the two platforms. I'm honestly very happy having 3 devices, having a smartphone, having a tablet, and having a laptop. But when we think about schools, I mean, we're not going to want probably to either provide for students or ask parents to provide, multiple devices. And so, anyway, the educational implications of all this, I see this being more on a consumer side and things that people are going to do with a tablet. I know that Apple really had a push at one point, and they probably still are. Maybe, I don't know. I'm wearing my Apple shirt today, so maybe it looks like I should know more than I do. I don't. At one point they were really pushing the iPad as the platform of the future, but yeah, I mean, we talked on the show a few weeks ago about how the changes in the processors, coming now, it's a few years before full transition, are going to mean touch devices probably on the laptop and iOS devices running, etc. But I don't know. I see the tablet world being more of an extra that you're going to have, probably not going to be your main daily driver to do everything that you need to do. But it'll be interesting. Ask me, in December or January, after I've spent a few months with kids using a 7th generation, not an iPad Pro, but a latest generation under the Pro level iPad with keyboard, with Apple Pencil compatible Logitech stylus, yada yada. So, but hey, I'm all for it. Go Eink. I think you should get it, Jason. Add it to your arsenal of devices. Tell your wife that your EdTech Situation Room compadre has authorized the purchase.
Well, there we go.
But
yeah,
it's not
that'll go. I'm sure that'll go really well.
Yeah,
so
that'll give you a lot of additional authorization to move forward.
Well, next week.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a great article and a discussion I would love to have with you about Firefox, but I think we'll just tease that for next week. Google bailed out Firefox a couple weeks ago, and I think there's a discussion I'd love to have with you about whether we need 2 browsers anymore. And to be honest, I keep going back and forth on whether or not this is true. But let's push that one to next week. Is there anything else we should absolutely hit this week?
Yeah, let's pick up a couple more quick. These are some odd ones, but good ones. This is from Ars Technica yesterday. The U.S. military took a big step toward a future space network this week. We have talked on the show with a sizable amount of anticipation and excitement about Starlink, which is SpaceX's and Elon Musk's push to have this low latency satellite network that is going to, well, it is now, it's in beta, but it promises to be able to provide global, very, very fast, internet connectivity. So there's 2 articles I have kind of related to this. This one reminds me of Starlink, but this is saying that the U.S. military has just issued some contracts for a big paradigm change in the way that they use communication satellites. Speaking as if we have access to the classified information, because we're sure there's all kinds of things that, they're doing that we have no idea about. But rather than using these really large multifunction telecommunication satellites, they're going to be deploying 300 to 500 in this layer, which will be redundant for GPS in case the GPS network gets taken down. But it's also going to have tracking capabilities for ground-based targets, as well as missiles and space-based targets. It's really a big deal. And it just makes me wonder, oh my gosh, the folks who are tracking all this stuff, I know Falcon Air Base outside of Colorado Springs used to be, and perhaps still is, the air base, now part of Space Command, I would guess, where they literally were tracking not only every satellite, but every piece of space debris, which there is a considerable amount going around our planet. So I thought this was pretty interesting. And in light of, other conversations that people are having about connectivity and things like that, pretty interesting to think about, this kind of a military network and the capacity and capability that that's going to give. Something else related to this that has to do with Starlink, also from Ars Technica, and this was from today. SpaceX seeks FCC broadband funds, must prove it can deliver sub 100 megabit per second latency. A couple of things from this article. Number one, what the FCC in the United States is defining as high speed here, and I guess I just sent that only to, let me fix my link. They're defining it as 25 megs down and 3 megs up. That's what they're saying is high speed. SpaceX in their betas of Starlink can definitely exceed that. But the key here is latency. In order to do live video conferencing or something like what we're doing here, you have to have very low latency. Gaming has to require low latency, and so they're confident that they can get that. There's like $16 billion that they're handing out, I think, over a 10-year period of time, usually to ISPs that are going to be helping rural customers, think Montana, Oklahoma, maybe people that help those folks have an option or maybe more than one option, but at least one option for high-speed wired connectivity. And so it looks like, SpaceX, I think we'd had an article a while back that made it sound like they were going to be out of the running, but this makes it sound like they're not. And obviously, if they can get that kind of funding, that would be beneficial for them. So I think that sounds exciting. I did look into, we've had some trouble with our internet and in the last few weeks, and we don't have I mean, we could go with AT&T, but where we can get a gigabyte down, I think AT&T can give us a maximum of like 25 or maybe 50 megs or something. But I mean, it's so not in the realm of competitive, that it'll be very interesting when this rolls out, because I don't think it'll just be, customers in rural spots. Obviously, those folks will be interested too, but there could even be folks that are in cities or folks that are in towns that, don't have other kinds of competition, depending upon how that gets priced. So.
Yeah, and to be clear, for both family and also the rural populations of my state, and then also personally, that my in-laws have a cabin that is nowhere near internet access, and although I'm sure they don't want internet access, I'd be happy to put whatever device they want on top of their cabin to be able to get internet, so I could spend summer times there working as opposed to being at my home. So I am cheering this effort and all that's involved.
Awesome.
Okay, well, sir, I think it's time to Geek of the Week it. So why don't you go first?
Well, I was almost going to say, look at Jason. He's doing several and I'm doing one, but I'll do two. So this looks fantastic. New documentary out on Netflix coming this month. It is called The Social Dilemma. And I learned about it from Tristan Harris, who is a co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology. They have the Your Undivided Attention podcast, which is just absolutely fantastic. And so on September 9th on Netflix alone, they are coming out with this documentary, which their byline is Silicon Valley Insiders Reveal How Social Media is Reprogramming Civilization. So when you think about the tech correction, you think about the impact which these very addictive, designed for addiction social media platforms are not only having on us as individuals, but also on us societally and within our culture. I think we're going to, be having a very strong and well-informed critique provided through this documentary, and the trailer is out, and I am definitely going to be checking that out. And then the second thing is just a great article. I'd had this under media literacy, and I'm just going to put it as a Geek of the Week. Best article I've ever read about memes. This is from MIT Technology Review in October of 2019. It's by Joan Donovan, who is somebody I follow in my media literacy Twitter list. But man, I did not know about some of these memes that were used in the 2016 election to portray that Hillary Clinton was not only going to get the draft going again, but was going to be drafting women. And these are really powerful. And I had not heard the idea that a meme really obtains power when it has anonymity in the culture. When you can't tell who it came from, what the original source was, it kind of just takes on a life of its own. And so this is a really excellent article. And I'm going to go so far as to say, I don't think any of us can adequately understand our communication landscape, and specifically the electoral influences that are happening with people today if we would ignore memes. I think memes are a huge, important communication phenomenon, medium, and this is an outstanding article, best article I've ever seen or read about memes. So highly commend that. Jason, you have 3 for us tonight. What do you got?
I do. It's the West strategy of the week. 2 of them are alike. If you are new to designing online learning, distance learning, remote teaching, you probably have not thought about accessibility yet, even though it's been pretty prominent in social media circles. But accessibility is the notion that content is able to be consumed by everyone, whether you have a disability or not. And so it's things like helping those that can't see certain colors, or people that use screen readers, or the many varieties of ways people access content. If this is not your thing yet, or it's not on your radar, you should educate yourself. And I did share the W3C standard, Introduction to Web Accessibility, which does absolutely apply to designing distance learning. But the article I really wanted to share was a great article from UX Design on August 14th. It's a guide on what makes typeface accessible. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because so many typefaces people use out of a notion of being interesting or creative are actually really hard to read for a lot of people, right? And that may include, and probably does include, at least some of your students. things. And I have been guilty at times in my education career of being a little overly fonty, I guess would be the way I describe it. I actually know quite a lot about, man, I'm a nerd, historical typefaces. I know a lot about the history of a lot of typefaces because that's very interesting to me. And sometimes I mix typefaces together, based on historical, overly fonty, historical, well, it's historically appropriate fonts when I used to teach history and design slides for my classroom. I'm so excited. I'm choking on my own spit. But the point is that this article goes into, if you are a little on the font creative side, that you could be actually diminishing the opportunity for all of your consumers of your content to really take in all of your content. And then for those who'd like to obsess about data, I'm 99.9% sure I probably shared a similar link in the early days of our podcast in 2016, but 538, hands down, the best site that categorizes political data, right? It's a site that's not just political data. They also analyze a bunch of sports data as well, if that is your data desires in the world. But they have a really great 2020 election forecast page. It does evolve every day with new polling data. And Nate Silver, who is the proprietor of 538, he's been around for at least since 2008, I think, is when he first came on the scene, analyzing elections data. But if you like to obsess about what's going on and want to start breaking down swing states and state-by-state polling, the 2020 election forecast at 538.com is pretty outstanding.
Outstanding. Well, it's hey, you know what? We did good. We started a little late though, and we're at just coming up to 60 minutes. So you did well, sir.
Perfect. So Wes, where can people find you on the internet?
I am on Twitter at WFryer. I'm blogging very rarely, but still every once in a while at speedofcreativity.org. And I am sharing some Spanish vocabulary, which I'm sure everyone is going to want to immediately go check out. But some of my other lessons for media and digital literacy on mdtech.cassidy.org. And how about you, Dr. Neiffer?
I am a tech-savvy teacher on Twitter, and I work with the Northwest Council for Computer Education in professional development, blog.ncc.org. But this thing here is the EdTech Situation Room. We are a once-a-week podcast that broadcasts on Wednesday nights. We are live at 8 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Central Time, somewhere in the middle of the night if you happen to be in Western Europe, but we love to have a live audience. So check out our Twitter handle, EdTechSR, or you can go to our Facebook page, just search for EdTech Situation Room, and you can get a notification that we are live. So please come join our chat room anytime you like. If you can't join us live, you can always download us where finer podcasts are aggregated. You can also find tiny little audio copies of our podcast along with every link we talk about each week at our website, edtechsr.com. Until next time, have a great week. We hope you are safe and savvy, and we'll see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.